Live from the Pix 11 Social Media Center, she's got more than 30 years on the streets as an investigative reporter. Now, Pix 11's Mary Murphy takes you deep into the world of cold cases, terrorism, America's drug crisis, and more. These are the Mary Murphy Files.
Good evening and welcome to the Mary Murphy Files, Pix 11 Facebook Live. I have a really special guest tonight, Detective Michael O'Keefe, retired NYPD. He knows a lot about homicides, a lot about gangs, and we're here to talk about the Junior case. Jury selection was supposed to begin today. Technically, it did. You're looking at the 5 defendants who are charged in the murder of Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz last June 20th. Interesting headline, though, from today. Apparently, 4 of those defendants want to have a separate jury consider their case. And then that 5th defendant, Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, there's his picture. Apparently, he potentially could have a separate jury listening to all the same testimony, but a separate jury might be considering his fate. The judge, Robert Neary, is supposed to rule on this request tomorrow. So there's a lot of talk about this today. Will there be 2 separate juries deciding the case of the 5 guys charged with murder 1 in the fatal stabbing of Junior last June 20th? Now, Detective O'Keefe, you know a lot about homicides. I said you know a lot about gangs. You didn't cover this case,
No.
but you said this is not unusual what's going on now.
No, it happens commonly in multiple defendant cases.
When there are a lot of people, right?
Yeah. The reasoning being, evidently, the people seated at that table, the defense table, they know who did what.
Right.
So if you have 4 defendants looking to separate themselves from that 5th defendant, chances are they don't want to be associated at all with the behavior of that 5th defendant.
Yeah, we're showing some of the surveillance from the night of Junior's killing. That's the case number right there, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of those reports in your time as a detective. But some of the more graphic surveillance we're not showing. Junior ran into that bodega seeking shelter, and there were cars chasing him, men on foot. And it's been established already before trial that Jonaiki Martinez Estrella allegedly plunged the knife into his neck, which was the wound that killed him. That's the wound that a lot of people saw on the surveillance when he ran back into the bodega. There's allegedly Jonaiki throwing him into the bodega. So that's the wound that killed him, according to the medical examiner. And I spoke to Junior's mother this evening, Leandra Feliz, and she's upset about the potential prospect of 2 juries. We had footage of her from the cemetery last September. She goes there almost every day to visit her son. And she told me tonight on the phone, they want to minimize the other ones. And she's very upset. She said they're all killers. And, you know, she cited what some of the investigators said, that Jonaiki was the one who cut his neck. And she also said she heard Jonaiki was asking for a deal. But, like, this is all stuff we're talking about, but nothing's been established in court yet. But you're not surprised that they may want to separate?
No, if you put yourself in the defendant's position, which as a detective we often had to do, to make sense of what it was they were thinking. Clearly, if one person is the primary actor or the worst actor of the group, if you have the opportunity to have your evidence considered separately from his jury's evidence, so that you're not necessarily attached to what he did, you would be motivated to do that.
Right. You're not surprised this is happening at this stage?
No, matter of fact, a case like this, I would expect it to.
Right, okay. So the pictures of Junior that we've all seen, he was 15 years old and he was said to have been a member of the NYPD Explorers. And you know, so many people spoke highly of him, his teachers at school, the deans. But the defense has already indicated it may try to taint his memory. One of the attorneys did that in the pretrial hearing. And I want to play some footage today. It's the only footage we really have. When we went to court today, we went down to the lower level outside Judge Neary's courtroom, and we were told we couldn't stay there, that we had to watch any proceedings from another level. So let me play the video I have from court today. This is Judge Neary's courtroom on the lower level of the Bronx County Hall of Justice. And you see that there's a sign saying that only potential jury members allowed inside. The rest of us will have to go upstairs to the 6th floor to view the proceedings, the questioning of the potential jurors. And I know you're the attorney for Jose Muniz.
I'm early.
You're early. Can you just tell us your name?
Martin Goldberg.
Now, Mr. Goldberg, in pretrial hearings, was questioning on cross-examination a detective who had been part of those taking statements from various defendants. Some of them actually did talk a little bit. Most asked for attorneys. But he's the first one who brought up in open court to the detective, did you know that they said that Junior was a member of the Trinitario Sunset crew? And the prosecutor objected. But you're probably not surprised that a member of the defense team is trying to paint a different picture of Junior.
I don't see how that would necessarily help this case. We're talking about a singular event here. And no matter what Junior was or was not prior to being murdered, it really shouldn't have any bearing. Frankly, it's a slimy tactic. Is he trying the case? Well, the only tactic I can conceive of that why he would besmirch Junior's reputation would to possibly use it as a way to attack the credibility of the detectives. An insinuation that he was a member of a gang, you're going to need a lot more proof than that.
Right.
It's just an insinuation.
Yeah, and I know that the police have told me they don't believe he had any connection. You know, they thought he was a good kid. He had no prior arrests or anything, so...
In a case like this, there would be no motive whatsoever to obscure if he had been a gang member, there would be no reason to obscure the fact.
Right.
It doesn't have to do with the facts of the case.
Right.
And doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
The jury isn't going to be less... First of all, the jury's not going to hear it anyway.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be less inclined to convict just because you're saying that the victim deserved it. That never works.
Right. Now, you know, one of the guys that's charged with murder in the second degree will not be facing trial this time around. He's the alleged leader of this crew that went out hunting for rivals. His name is Diego Suero. And we were surprised during the pretrial hearings when it came out, according to a police detective on the stand, that Diego Suero was actually giving up a lot of information once he was brought in. He sort of named everyone that was on the scene. He said there was a meeting before and after. But I'm told that he may not actually be a person who testifies at this case. You have told me maybe they would use him in another case, like a federal case, RICO case.
Well, he could actually be a defendant in a federal RICO case if they were going to do a far-reaching criminal enterprise case.
Right, which they had done on the federal level maybe about 8 years ago in the Southern District. They arrested about 50 or 60 of the supposed top echelon of the Trinitarios. And I guess there was a lot of jockeying for position that went on in the years since.
Well, those positions are filled rather quickly.
Yeah.
You take down, it's a bit like a hydra. You cut the heads off and they grow back. And that's what you face when you're dealing with criminal enterprises and gangs.
It was funny, when I was in the hallway today, I said it was interesting to me there's not supposed to be an anonymous jury. I think it will be a public process of selecting the jury. And someone associated with the case said, well, it's not like they have the reach of El Chapo, because El Chapo's jury was anonymous. That was the little quip I heard in the hallway today.
Well, there are levels of concern with respect to that. Yeah, do the Trinitarios have the reach that the cartel in Mexico has? No, obviously they don't. They don't have the resources to find out who the juror members might be, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any resources. So someone on a higher pay grade than me is going to make that decision.
Right, and you know, also it seems that there is an unindicted co-conspirator possibly in this case. Someone called Witness A. We're not saying his name out loud. A lot of people have speculated, but there was someone who was on the scene who did not participate in the stabbing that did go in and speak to the police within a few days. And we believe that's Witness A. And you're saying it's common when there's a gang murder like this that someone would have to be a cooperating witness for the police to have an effective prosecution.
Well, it's not necessary, however, given the circumstances, and I don't know what the investigators have in this case, but if you have a multiple defendant case, and you're proving a number of things as it relates to this crime, one of them being the conspiracy, the other is who participated in the overall act of surrounding him, And then you have the individual behaviors during the physical assault.
Yeah, so this guy was not there when the actual assault and stabbing took place.
But he might be able to help you prove your conspiracy.
And
who
you think
actually
that's
was there.
important for the case?
Well, it could
You
help.
can't-
It could definitely help the case.
You can't just go by the videos.
Well, the videos are only going to tell you so much. You're not going to learn necessarily motive from the videos. These videos, from what I understand, are very clear. You're going to know who participated and who did what during the actual physical assault. But the other answer that you have to come up with is the why.
Right.
And you basically need somebody to substantiate the conspiracy and what was discussed and the reason. And then you have your motive.
And, supposedly they were looking for rivals that,
Which is typical gang behavior.
yeah, so that's not something that you're surprised at. A lot has been said in the last, say, 6-8 months. Well, this happened almost 10 months ago. But a lot of speculation about the role of someone else who could or could not be a witness. We're not sure yet. I interviewed him. He went out of state after this happened. He received a lot of threats. He was the last person to basically see Junior alive for a significant amount of time, for about 90 minutes. He's the one who contacted Junior and asked him to come out of the house. So I went and met him out of state. And I'm just going to replay that for the people who may not remember the interview. I have about 1:30 of that. Jason Velez.
I'm innocent. I'm not hiding from nothing. They're just sitting there saying that I basically set up Junior and everything, when in all reality, I didn't even know what was going to happen to Junior.
20-year-old Jason Velez has moved out of the Bronx and out of the state.
I had to delete all my social media after the incident because of how many death threats I was receiving.
What were people saying?
They were saying, I should rot in hell. I'm a piece of shit.
Velez acknowledges he called Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz just before 10 p.m. on June 20th. Jr. was home on his PlayStation 4 game.
He said, Mommy, Jason asked for $5. And I was already in bed.
Velez says he was with another friend when Jr. came to Bassford Avenue and East 183rd Street to give him the money.
Me and Chanel, we was already about to smoke.
Velez claims Jr. told him about a recent incident at nearby Adams Place, where a friend was chased and beaten by suspected gang members.
One of the guys, they just sat there and they mean mugged him.
Stared at him.
Yes. I was like, bro, the streets is nothing to play with.
Velez said Jr.'s mother called the teen at 11:28 p.m. and told him to come home.
There are many on social media who insist that Junior must have been set up, but police don't really see it that way.
And here's what my law enforcement source just revealed when I asked what happened after Junior left Bassford Avenue but didn't go straight home. Quote, "There's no text on Junior's phone records to come to Adams Place. Junior made a call." All right, that was one of my sources when I first did the story on Jason Velez. And one last thing I want to ask you about before we talk about some of your experiences with gangs. These guys are charged not only with murder, but also with manslaughter. And there are a total of 14 suspects. 9 of them will be charged or face trial separately. Why is it that they're also charged with manslaughter? Is there a chance that they're going to be treated differently ultimately when the jury decides?
Yeah, well, for murder in the second degree, you're talking about the government has to prove intentional murder. In lieu of that, because this is a multiple defendant case, you also have accessorial conduct, raises it up to murder in the second degree also. When the testimony comes out about the various involvement in the actual act, sometimes the jury may decide, well, he didn't do very much, I don't want to send him away for 30 years to life. And they might opt to convict of manslaughter. Manslaughter is a lesser included
Lesser
for
included
murder.
charge, yes.
Yeah, so it's,
Well, I know murder too can mean depraved indifference to human life, but the jury will have to decide.
very difficult to prove depraved indifference. Intentional, usually what you're going to see in these types of murders, that they're either intentional or accessorial conduct. With respect to depraved indifference, it's usually something along different lines.
Okay. Well, you were part of an infamous case in 1992 in Washington Heights, and I know that you sort of wrote about that in a novel, your book, Shot to Pieces. I think we also have a close-up of it. Michael O'Keefe, author. It's a novel, but you sort of talk about a case, obviously, that was sort of something that had a huge impact on your life. I covered it. I was a young reporter then, and it involved an alleged drug dealer or convicted drug dealer. Was he convicted or alleged?
He had been convicted of dealing drugs. He was
Kiko Garcia.
Yeah, he was out on parole. He was there were several warrants for him at the time of the incident.
And he was from the Dominican Republic?
Oh, he was born there, yeah.
He was born in the Dominican Republic, but not necessarily part of an organized gang, or what was the name of his group?
He was part of an he was part of a drug organization. I found out after the investigation was over, he was part of the drug crew that ran 162nd Street between Broadway and St. Nicholas Avenue,
Washington Heights.
which was a very large drug selling organization.
A lot of cocaine?
Yeah, multiple kilos of cocaine. It was, you're talking about 1992 in Washington Heights. You could roll up on the corner and buy a kilo of cocaine without even tapping the brakes of your car.
And you were working anti-crime, and so then you encountered him, and what happened?
I saw him from the car as we were heading up to the corner, and first of all, he looked agitated.
And it was very hot out.
It was, with the humidity, it was like 107 degrees. And he was wearing a sports jacket, probably heavier than the one I'm wearing now. And he was constantly pulling the lapel over the front and center of his waist. And he had something under there. I couldn't see what it was at that point yet, but it was a good guess at that time. It might be a firearm. So you want to get a better look. You want to get a better look. At the time, I looked nothing like a cop. I had a nice flowing head of rock star hair, bunch of earrings and a goatee, and I was dressed down. And my partners dropped me off at the corner, and I took up a position on the corner to keep an eye on them. And they were going to use the unmarked car, which really wasn't so unmarked. All the bad guys knew it was a police car. And they were going to come up from Broadway, and the idea is they would flush him right into me. The four of us would meet on the street. The arrest would be made. Everything's good. Unfortunately, he decided to go to the building closer to Broadway.
Right.
And as I went to grab him at the door, he elbowed me in the throat and dragged me in.
He elbowed you in the throat?
In the throat, and then dragged me into the lobby.
So
well, because I was holding on to him, he backed into the lobby.
Yeah, so I'm sure you felt your life was in danger.
Yeah, I thought once I entered that hallway, which looked more like a mausoleum than anything else, I didn't think I was coming out alive.
Okay, so what happened inside the hallway?
About a 5-minute fight to the death, basically. He kept trying to draw his gun.
He was trying to get his gun out?
Trying to get his gun out. It actually got it out. I ended up losing the radio halfway through the encounter, so
and how close was the gun to you? Where was it pointed?
Oh, it hit me in the face.
I'm sorry?
It hit me in the face.
He had it pointed at your face?
Well, he was bringing it up, and it actually struck me in the cheek when I grabbed his hand and pulled it away. And it was at that point when I was losing grip on his hand a second time because of perspiration and blood. We were both bleeding all over the place. When I lost grip on the hand, the gun came up again, and I was looking down the barrel when I reached out with my own firearm and shot him in the chest.
You shot him, and then he was killed. Now,
yeah,
this spawned riots in Washington Heights.
Oh, yeah, I was public enemy number one.
You were getting crucified, right?
Yeah.
In the papers and probably on TV.
The mayor wanted my head on a stick. He threw me under the wheels of the bus, and unfortunately the media just reported what the rioters were saying about me.
Right, and so also they paid for the funeral. The city paid for the funeral.
Yeah, which was interesting. Because I was a lifelong city resident, they used my money to bury the guy who tried to kill me. It's kind of ironic.
When did things turn around for you?
The stories started to turn around toward the end of the summer when the grand jury was finishing up. Some good stories started to leak out, refuting some of the bad ones that made no sense whatsoever. And then ultimately, when I was cleared in the grand jury, Robert Morgenthau, the DA at the time, took the unprecedented step of producing an enormous volume of every witness that testified, every scintilla of evidence that was presented, and painstakingly explained the impossibility of my guilt.
Right, so the grand jury refused to indict.
Right, they found that the shooting was justified.
The shooting was justified. And things finally calmed down, and you continued to work and you became a detective.
Well, a little bit more of a bumpy road than that. They buried me for a while.
Oh, really?
You know,
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, so then when did things normalize for you, if you can say that?
Well, I ended up making detective in 1995, but they backdated my shield. They held it up for a while, unjustifiably. And then shortly after that, I was rescued by Chief Esposito. At the time, he was the commanding officer of the 83rd Precinct,
Right.
and he asked me to come work for him in the A3, and that's where I finished my career.
And went back to investigating gangs and homicides.
Gangs, homicides. Well, I grew up in Ridgewood and Bushwick, so I was familiar with the neighborhood.
Right. So I guess it made you stronger as a person to have gotten through that.
Yeah, I would think so. I hope so.
Right.
I would hate to think that I'm diminished by it.
Right. So now that you're an author, what else are you going to be writing? We'll show the book one more time because I told you I'm reading it on vacation. So
You'll be done with it quick. It's a quick read. I'm waiting to hear back from an agent. I haven't been signed yet, but the prequel to this book, the detective involved, Patty Durr.
that's the character.
That's the main character. He's the detective in Shot to Pieces. He appears in A Reckoning in Brooklyn as a 17-year-old.
Okay. And this is sort of based a lot on your own life. Is that correct?
it's. I don't want to go so far as to say it's autobiographical, but it's from my experiences.
Right.
And my knowledge. I recognize everybody in these books. I don't know if everyone will. I actually just finished the first draft of the manuscript for the third book in the series,
Yes.
called Burnt to a Crisp, which is based on another of my homicide cases in Bushwick. Was a triple homicide, was an arson, where an elderly father and mother and their son with Down syndrome were killed in a fire.
If you had to do it all over again, would you do everything the same, pretty much?
I would have protected my knees so I could have done it longer.
Oh, your knees
I'd
forced
still
you.
be, if I did not get hurt, I'd still be catching murders in Brooklyn.
So you love the job.
Oh yeah, it was probably the most important work that I've ever done,
Yeah. And now you're writing about it.
which I enjoy, but I don't necessarily know that it's important.
Well, I have to thank you for being here tonight. And just to wrap up again and sort of encapsulate what happened today, I'll show some of the suspects, the defendants in the Junior case. You know, there was sort of some new information that came out today. The defense team apparently wants to have two separate juries decide the evidence in this case. One jury would look at 4 of the defendants, and the other jury potentially would look at Jonaiki Martinez Estrella. Now, the judge has to decide on this tomorrow, we're told. The motion was made, and the decision we're thinking will come tomorrow. And I guess the decision has to be made before the actual formal jury selection begins. But we do know that there were lines of people today at the court that were there potentially to be screened for this jury and others. So I have to thank you, retired Detective Michael O'Keefe, for coming here tonight and helping us so much with your knowledge. And I also want to thank the viewers who have followed this case from day one, since June 20th, 2018, and every development. You've been with me along the way, and I really appreciate your support, and I thank you for following us on Pix 11 Facebook Live and, of course, pix11.com and our broadcasts. I'll see you the next time, and I hope you have a good night.